because this is the 10-minute monologue on human breakups. Hate, yes, that's right, hate, and the weapons people make out of children. Let's begin with something simple, almost innocent, a puppy. A puppy will bite your shoe, piss on the floor, your headphones, and stare you dead in the face like you're the unreasonable one. But here's the point. The puppy is learning. It doesn't know language. It speaks puppy language. It doesn't know the rules. It doesn't have a self-concept fragile enough to shatter at the sound of criticism. The puppy doesn't pretend to be perfect, do you? It doesn't rewrite reality to suit its ego. When it messes up, you correct it, it sulks, it licks your hand, and an hour later, and life goes on. Now, compare that to an adult with a fragile ego, a shaky internal world, and a breakup under their belt. Suddenly, the species that sent robots to Mars becomes incapable of basic cooperation. The adult who once said, "I love you," now behaves like the medieval warlord, preparing for siege and the attack. Rationality, gone. Shared history, gone. Perspective, gone. All replaced by a psychological smoke cloud made of panic, pride, fear, resentment, and the desperate need to blame someone, anyone, for the ache inside. And this is where the tragedy begins, because there are people, many people, lots of people, who do not break up. They collapse internally, like a building with shoddy foundations finally giving in. And instead of saying, "My foundations were weak," they say, you pushed the building. It's your fault, it's you. And the courtroom, well, that's the insurance. That's the insurance, yeah. Where they try to collect emotional compensation for structural issues they refused to repair. Why hate? Why attack? Why destroy? Why? Because hate is easier than accountability. Maybe. Attack is easier than reflection. Probably. Destruction is easier than self-confrontation. Definitely. If you can declare your ex as dangerous, cruel, unfit, unstable, then you never have to turn inward and see the uncomfortable truth yourself. You contributed. You failed in places. You reacted instead of communicating. You caused harm too. But many people cannot bear that level of honesty. It threatens the entire story that they use to hold themselves together. So they build a new narrative, and one where they are noble, protective, righteous, and you become the villain, because a villain is required to justify their storyline. And as children, as collateral. Now, here's the darkest part. When someone hates their ex more than they love their own peace, the child becomes the rope in the psychological tug-of-war, and the parent doing it loudly, tearfully, passionately. They'll do it protecting their child. They'll believe they're protecting their child, but what they are really protecting is their own ego. To acknowledge the other parent's value would require admitting that their own behavior is harmful, and they can't do that. So they distort love into something unrecognizable, something weaponized. They tell themselves, "I'm doing this for the child." But the child grows up with missing pieces labeled father, mother, truth, security, sense of self. And the family court system, is perfectly engineered to reward the emotional chaos. It doesn't have time to understand your family. It doesn't have time to investigate who's balanced and who's burning down like the house. It responds to crises, and whoever creates the biggest crises often commands the attention. The parent ignoring a court order, apparently understandable. Someone sending a text that contains the blunt truth, and yes, launch the paperwork missiles. Issues the prohibitions, erect the bureaucratic barricades, and the system calls itself neutral. The psychology of destruction is massive. Now, look, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's just touch the surface, like a little bit deeper, right? People who launch psychological warfare after a breakup usually fall into one of a few patterns: the abandonment reactor. And these people cannot tolerate the idea of being left, so they rewrite the whole story into one where they are the hero, escaping the danger. It itself is preservation masquerading as righteousness. Then you have the accountability avoider. These people cannot face their own reflection, so they distort the mirror. They make you the problem, so they never have to examine their own thoughts or their own self. The identity collapser. Their role in the relationship was part of their identity. So when the relationship ends, their identity shatters, and then they have to try and rebuild it by destroying you. The person who saw the cracks, and so you see the cracks and they have to destroy you. The emotional historian. The one that collects every hurt, real or imagined, polishes it and uses it to justify their retaliation. They don't resolve feelings, they refrigerate them and serve them cold. And then you've got the social validator. This person cares more about being seen as the good one than actually being good. So they perform sainthood while behaving like a saboteur. These psychological patterns turn into, well, they turn breakups into wars, and wars into lifelong legacies of trauma. Now, this is the reality. This is how I like to look at things. People act out the battle they're losing inside themselves. If they feel unlovable, they accuse you of withholding love. If they feel guilty, they accuse you of harm. If they feel chaotic, they accuse you of instability. If they feel they failed their child, they declare you as the unfit parent. Projection isn't just a defense mechanism for some people. It's but I believe something that cuts through all of this is that you cannot control their behavior. You can only control your response. You cannot control their story, only your truth. You cannot control their war, only your peace. So why doesn't everyone do this? Why doesn't everyone just look at the world that way? Unfortunately, not because everyone's is not built on that psychological quicksand. Some people break up and it's move on, realize the relationship ended, but the responsibility to the children did not. Some understand that parenting is not about, well, it's not about comfort, but it's about continuity. But for the ones who wage these wars, it becomes a kind of identity, a purpose, a structure, story big enough to fill the emptiness that they'd feel without it. So what's the sentence? What's the distilled portable truth? What is it? Well, here it is. When some people break up, they don't grieve. They convert their pain into a weapon. They call it protection, but it's projection. They call it love, but it's fear. They call it justice, but it's ego. And the child becomes collateral in a battle fought entirely inside one adult's unresolved mind.